Good morning. I had forgotten to get my little note cards. So it's my altar getting them. Okay. And Fat Boy went to say good morning. He's feeling much better. Oh, and Sierra's going to make an appearance. Come here, Cece. No? Sierra, want to come say hi to the camera? Come here. No? All right. Okay, calm down. Cece's doing much better. Okay, stop. It's okay. Calm down. Feeling better, huh? Already. Good boy. Good baby boy. Yeah. Good baby boy. You're amazing. You're a miracle. You're a miracle. You're alive. Yeah. Okay, that's enough. All right, that's it. Hope everyone had a good Easter. I felt the Easter vibes. All right. We left off at ninth house, right? No. We read the ninth house. The ninth house is in Sagittarius. Where's the 10th house? I skipped a page. Did I skip a page? Where's the 10th house? Oh, there it is. 10th house. That's where we're at. We're at the 10th house. 10th house. 10th house. Highest potential. 5th and 7th chakras. Now remember, the 5th chakra is our throat, which is surrender to personal will to divine will. So that corresponds with highest potential. Isn't that interesting? Divine will gets you to your highest potential. Power, choice, strengths, faith, self-knowledge, personal authority, and ability to keep your word. The shadow side of this chakra is obsessive need to control relationships and events. Okay, and the 7th, 5th, and 7th chakra, which is Christ consciousness. And that is live in the present moment. Inner divinity is our strengths, faith in the divine, as well as inner guidance, insight into healing devotions. Yeah, healing devotions. The shadow side of that is that the only card there is for that one? Yeah, the shadow side of that is the need to know why things happen as they do, which creates a person to live in the past. I struggle with that. Okay, so this 10th house, highest potential, 5th and 7th chakra. The 10th house is ruled by Capricorn. Interesting. My Venus is in Capricorn. The third earth sign of the astrological chart. My son's father is a Capricorn. The energy of this house works on your highest potential. To look at my 10th house. Let's see what sign is in my 10th house. It's ruled by Capricorn, the third earth sign of the astrological chart. The energy of this house works on your highest potential. It pushes you to be all that you can be in your physical world and your spiritual life. What is the highest potential of your compassionate self or your generosity? What is your highest potential when it comes to empowering another? What is the highest potential you can strive for with your talents? Your highest potential is what your sacred contract is prompting you to recognize and realize. Because this requires that you make choices regarding your spiritual destiny. This house, the house corresponds to the energies of both the 5th and 7th chakras. The archetype that resides in this house is your entryway into deciphering the choices open to you and the quality of your motivations. The shadow side of your highest potential is self-sabotage, or doubt, or lack of faith, fear of failure, as well as fear of success and responsibility, characterizes the challenges inherent in this house. These are basically fears of your own powers and empowerment and the changes they require you to make in your life. You will need to face whether you would deliberately block your highest potential from emerging and why. You will also be challenged to retain humility as you become more empowered. Pursuing your highest potential is the most difficult marathon. Oh boy, is it. With each upgrade, whether professional or personal, something or someone will arise to test the depth and solidarity of your inner growth. I feel like I'm going through that right now. I mean, I'm noticing it. I've been going through, I notice this is a true statement. Pursuing your highest potential is the most difficult marathon. With each upgrade, whether personal or professional, something or someone will arise to test the depth and solidarity of your inner growth. On the earthly plane, this encounter might present itself as a confrontation between you and another person who doesn't want you to change. Or you may find yourself in a relationship with someone of whom you've become jealous, which will test your own personal potential to support another's talents and gifts. Or you may be given an opportunity to pursue a goal of inner transformation, only to discover that such opportunities always require that you leave a part of your life behind, that you make a necessary sacrifice. Some people find sacrifice and change too high a price to pay and do not pursue or fulfill their potential. The archetype in your 10th house is the indicator of how your unconscious organizes your thoughts when you are faced with choices that can lead you into fulfilling your potential. Remember that although all of your archetypal companions provide influence in every aspect of your life, the archetype that resides in this house represents the symbolic language that you want to use to begin deciphering all that your highest potential holds. Foley's life holds an extraordinary contract. Foley has an identical twin brother named Dennis, and like many twins, they were inseparable until they reached their college years. Dennis had assumed that they would both go into business management. Foley, however, fearing his brother's objections, had kept hidden from Dennis his own desire to study botany and to move to Costa Rica for a few years. Soon after they began college, Dennis became aware that Foley had a different future in mind and became withdrawn. He felt completely betrayed and said that Foley should have kept him informed all along about his growing interest in a different future. Dennis viewed Foley's decision to move to Central America as abandonment. Although Foley anticipated that Dennis would be upset, he was surprised by the severity of his brother's reaction. Dennis changed schools in their sophomore year. In time, this pressure exerted on Foley by his parents and his broken relationship with his brother compelled him to forsake his ambition. I met Folly about 3 years after he sacrificed his dream. By then, he had completed a degree in accounting. He was working as a waiter and hoping to continue studies in computer science, but his heart wasn't in anything he was doing. Until Folly admitted that he had compromised his dreams, he would never feel fulfilled. At first glance, Folly's problem may appear to be a third house concern over siblings and communication, but Folly's primary issue was that he was negotiating his own calling in life, a 10th house issue. He was not following his inner voice to pursue his highest potential. Dennis may have been the immediate reason, but the core issue was Folly's own anguish over losing his highest potential. In many situations, as in Folly's, different concerns may overlap. You may need to peel away several layers of issues and several houses before you get to the central one. Folly had the hero archetype in his 10th house. When I asked him why he had chosen the hero as one of his 12 archetypes, he said that he associated endurance, dedication, and loyalty with the hero. He had consciously worked on developing these qualities all of his life, particularly in regard to helping and looking out for his twin. He added, however, that he always felt he would be directed on a mission that would require he separate from his twin. I knew it since I was a kid, he confided, because I have been aware for a long time that I was carrying my brother's psyche on my shoulders. I was always trying to make sure he was happy and safe, and I was the one always working out his problems and helping him to make the grade. And I knew that I would have to part with him, if only to give the same level of attention to myself. I wanted to know what it felt like to put me first and who I would be if I were totally free to make any choice I wanted to without having to check in with my other half. I asked Folly to describe the difference between how he saw his hero in the business arena and how he saw his hero as a botanist striving to maintain the health of endangered nature's life. The phrasing of the question alone almost crushed him. There is no comparison, he said. I'll never contribute to life by adding numbers as much as I would working in the field. We discussed what prevented him from returning to his original course. By now, his twin should have been able to care of himself, and I asked him to name 3 compromises that his brother had made in his life to ensure that Folly would be happier. He couldn't offer even one. When I asked Folly to describe the health of his hero archetype, he said that he felt that the hero had become a weak and defeated force in his spirit, and that it embarrassed him to remember that he had walked away from his own inner guidance. I don't believe I have any courage left, and maybe I never had any in the first place. If I did, I think I would have gone ahead and moved to Central America. Folly was living in the shadow of his hero, and his way out was to pull himself out of his own misery by finally deciding that his life meant enough to him to go ahead and live it. Adjusting his physical life to suit the demands of the commitment would be his initiatory hero's journey, and it would give him a sample of his highest potential. The next test, choosing to break free of his tribe and to pursue one of the tasks of his spirit, would represent the next stage of the hero's journey. After visualizing this break to freedom, Folly felt renewed. His breathing changed, and his energy temporarily shed its depression. He began to glimpse that his brother and parents were not the real reason why he failed to take hold of his highest potential. Folly had the hermit archetype in his 3rd house. siblings, and communication, expressing his need to separate from the strong family psyche that held so much influence over him. Unlike his brother or his family members, Folly needed his own space to express his life, expression being a third house characteristic. With or without his brothers clinging to him, he would have had to seek an independent path. As in all contracts, his family was actually a gift for him. Many families serve out their roles as obstacles, then become powerful supporters. Folly's was, excuse me, excuse me. Folly's was the embodiment of a collective challenge that would refine his inner hero, forcing it to be determined and independent. One of the manifestations of the shadow aspect of the third house is in the way we communicate, not just with others, but with ourselves, our psyches, our spirit, and intuition, and with the very essence of our life. When Folly did not follow the voice and yearning of his own spirit and did not communicate his desires to his brother and family, he betrayed his inner voice and alienated his spirit. Now he would have to call on his hero to recapture his soul. The 11th house, relationship to the world, the 4th and 6th chakras. The 11th house of 4th and 6th. The 4th is the heart, how we relate to others in the world, which is love is divine power, love and compassion, forgiveness, dedication, inspiration, hope, trust, and the ability to heal. Shadow, jealousy, anger, the inability to forgive, and resentment. 6th house. Seek only the truth, wisdom and strength, intellectual skills, evaluation. Is there no shadows card on this one? I guess not. That's this third eye. Okay. The 11th house. The 11th house corresponds to Aquarius, the third air sign, and it rules your relationship to the external world and your ideas about the outer sphere. Your viewpoint about life in general is connected to the energy of this house. Those sentiments reflect how you see your sense of power operating within the social or global environment. People who are drawn to paths of service that have global consequences, such as environmental causes or international peace work, have strong connections to the energy of this house. Optimism and pessimism about the future of humanity is an extension of the spiritual energy of the 11th house. The 11th house rules how you relate your creativity to humanity and engages the energies of your 4th and 6th chakras, which regulate your heart and mind. The presidential race between George W. Bush and Al Gore was an archetypical 11th house tug of war. The difficulties in deciding who had won the election focused national attention on the power that individuals do have to change the whole future of humanity. As a result, Americans seriously evaluated the importance of single votes as never before. People who are empowered by an attitude that says anything is possible live in an energy field of pure 11th house potential. They are frequently larger than life, precisely because they do think in global terms. For them, 11th house perceptions flood into their first thoughts of the day and are the last to leave their minds as they retire at the end of the day. People like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi, who created new awareness in the mind and soul of all humanity, embody the influence of the 11th house. As they peered through the lens of the 11th house into the global village, they saw the possibilities for positive change against impossible odds. Not all people need to start or participate in a cause to contribute a positive energy into the planet. I meet countless people who energize powerful attitudes about life as such as all people are basically good and who help those in need. These people nurture the entire human soul. As Jesus said, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Matt 25:40. Developing the capacity to see the whole of life as beautiful and to see people as essentially loving beings is like participating in a spiritual environmental movement. We have no way of measuring the power of a single thought, yet we know that attitudes and beliefs have universal consequences. Spiritual masters, popular leaders, scientific geniuses, and great artists who are dedicated to serving humanity. My little furry son is ripping up his toy, Snoopy. Hi, son. Are you ripping up your toy? I can hear you over there. Yes, I can. You go ahead. You go play. Go play. I'm reading. You go play. You need some loves? Not all people need to start or participate in a cause to contribute a positive energy into the planet. I meet countless people who energize powerful attitudes about life, such as all people are basically good and to help those in need. These people nurture the entire human soul. As Jesus said, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Matt 25:40. Developing the capacity to see the whole of life as beautiful and to see people as essentially loving beings is like participating in a spiritual environmental movement. We have no way of measuring the power of a single thought, yet we know that attitudes and beliefs have universal consequences. Spiritual masters, popular leaders, scientific geniuses, and great artists who are dedicating to serving humanity all illustrate what good can be generated by dedicating your spirit to incarnating a single perception. For instance, Copernicus recorded humanity's understanding of planetary movements by disputing the notion that the Earth was the center of the solar system. That one thought dismantled the scientific paradigm of his time. One day the Earth appeared flat, and the next day it was round. A single perception reshaped the collective view of the globe. You too may be the channel through which an entirely new understanding of reality will manifest. Review your life and your relationships. Look for changes that you have inspired in others who then went on to move mountains in their own lives. Most of the mountains we deal with are not necessarily enormous global movements, but everyday challenges or invisible forces like attitudes. Generations benefit from even one parent deciding to become a more active father to his children or to stop hating people who are different from him. When John Lennon effectively retired from public life to care for his infant son Sean, for instance, the concept of the house husband was essentially unheard of. Lennon took considerable abuse for supposedly trading in his guitar for an apron, and yet his example formed a model that millions of men have since embraced, much to the delight of their wives or partners and children. Maintaining the single thought form, nurturing it with loving attention and an ever-deepening appreciation for what it means to live in an interconnected universe, transmits spiritual electricity to the collective system. Now, just on that note, I have heard, and I don't know John Lennon personally, and I never did, and obviously he's dead. I have heard he wasn't a good father or a good husband. That is what I've heard. I've never read about it, and I have no proof. And unless you talk to the people personally, I don't think there is proof. But even if that is the case, he still set a precedence, and that's really what this little paragraph is focusing on. Great spiritual masters have continually directed their students to become aware of the power of their own spirits. In an effort to enlighten their students about their inner potential, such leaders echo the words of the Buddhist patriarch Bodhidharma. I am but a finger pointing to the moon. Don't look at me, look at the moon. When Jesus said of his miraculous healings, all this and more you can do if you have faith. His message was clear. Each person can become a force for the transformation of the whole of humanity, if only we recognize and live according to the true nature of the divinity within. The external world is but a manifestation of the authority of our internal life. In the Chicago suburb of Des Plaines, Illinois, is a Carmelite monastery. For only one afternoon, many years ago, the Carmelite nuns permitted a group of people to visit a very limited portion of the interior space of the cloister. I was among that group, and I could vividly recall their stark dining room, their private cells with bare white walls, and the long corridor that led to rooms we would never enter. As soon as we were all seated in the reception area, the abbess spoke to us about the spiritual significance of the nuns' commitment. Living under a vow of silence in a continual state of prayer on behalf of all people. These women believed that all their prayers resulted in outpourings of grace from the divine upon the humanity they almost never saw. A few nuns were permitted to speak with visitors that afternoon, and I asked one why she believed that the prayers of a group of 17 women could possibly affect the world's community. I can tell by your question, she said, that you have yet to truly need the power of a single prayer. Years later in Paris, I had the opportunity to have dinner with the Tibetan Buddhist teacher Sogyal Rinpoche. I don't know how to pronounce that word, but I have heard of this Buddhist teacher. Among the many stories he shared with me was the story of his master's death. When it was time for my master to die, he called together his students and his astrologers, Rinpoche said. He announced that he was now preparing to leave and asked his astrologers to cast a chart with the intention of locating the perfect time for him to withdraw his spirit from the earth. He wanted to leave as silently as he could so as not to cause disruption. Sogyal Rinpoche also explained that the power of one enlightened spirit is strongly involved in holding in balance the positive and negative energies of life. The archetype that resides within your 11th house is symbolic of how you view the power of your spirit in relation. You want cuddles? Come on. In relation to the whole of life. The victim archetype on that house, which I have often seen, can suggest that you find the world as an intimidating place, where everyone has more authority over your life than you do. On the other hand, I've also seen the victim in this position in the charts of people who are on fire with courage and optimism. For the victim becomes a symbol of the negative energy they refuse to give into, pushing themselves to the limits to help themselves and others avoid ever being victimized. Archetypes in the 11th house can cause us to evaluate how we see our place in this world and how we measure our sense of power. My graduate teacher of Christology told me that the more aware you are of the power of your spirit, the less you have to travel physically, because you can send your thoughts and prayers to do work for you. It may be difficult to apprehend that, even while hanging out in your own home. Your thoughts are influencing the whole of your life. But that truth is something we are all under contract to learn. The shadow side of the power of one mind can be seen in people such as Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Charles Manson, and Jim Jones. The characteristic of the shadow side of the 11th house feed on an ego that makes one believe that the entire globe can be transformed according to the dictates of one's desires. The psyches of people in whom this shadow is active are like spider webs. They lure and entrap the multitudes who are in search of someone to give them a vision of what life could be like if they, the powerless, had authority over others. As history tells us, such negative 11th house perceptions inevitably implode, taking their supporters with them. And the last house of the zodiac, the 12th house, which is in Pisces. And I'm a double Pisces. I love being a Pisces. I am a Pisces moon and I am a Pisces sun. The 12th house, the unconscious, the 6th and 7th chakras, third eye, Christ consciousness. The 12th house corresponds to the third water sign, Pisces, which in the sign of intuition, of gut instinct. This is Persephone's house, the underworld ruled by Pluto, or what I would call the major channel into deeper guidance. Hi, my love. Hi, my love bug. The 12th house rules the unconscious mind as well as our innermost fears. The energetic nature of this house pushes our underground images into our mind through every available portal. Dreams, conversations, synchronistic encounters, any means that provide an opportunity to see a fragment of our contract in action. Hi, baby. Hi. Let me see. Where did I leave off? The energetic nature of this house pushes our underground images into our mind through every available portal. Dreams, conversations, synchronistic encounters, any means that provide an opportunity to see a fragment of our contract in action. Uncovering your unconscious requires your intellect, intuition, and spiritual aspirations. And so this house resonates with the energies of the 6th and 7th chakras. Your intuitive abilities are part of the energy of this house. Refer to the meaning of the first house and review the circular journey of the archetypical wheel. Note that the other houses relate to rational and emotional aspects of your nature. Forming your identity and choosing your values are largely products of the physical world. Finding a union with another person, and evaluating whether you want to continue to carry your tribe's symbolic DNA in your system is very much an emotional and psychological issue. Completion of the circle, however, leads you to your intuitive voice. Intuition is our primal sense. Long before we are introduced to rational thinking, we sense life. As babies, we absorb the energy climate of the world we live in, including the emotions of our parents and the atmosphere of our home. As we grow older, the rational abilities of the mind develop, and the intuitive experience that many children describe, such as seeing angels, are dismissed as imagination. These psychic forces then go underground, although usually they do not go completely silent. I am convinced that the polarity between our rational and intuitive selves creates an inner atmosphere that sets the stage for intense suffering and depression. To sense energy information but then repress that information for lack of rational support is to court madness. Learning to speak archetypes and see symbolically awakens and uses your intuition. The archetypal pattern that resides in your 12th house is your guide into your underground. Although your fears may seem multitudinous, each one is ultimately just a different version of the fear of change, which is by far the most powerful obstacle to the ultimate irrational act of spiritual surrender. Your 12th house experiences carry the theme of surrender, as in the scene from It's a Wonderful Life, in which George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, contemplating suicide on a bridge over an icy river, finally reaches his breaking point and cries out to God for help. A few years ago, I met a woman named Chris who had herself at a breaking point. Her husband had been arrested for extortion, and the authorities had taken all of their possessions in an effort to recover the money he had stolen. Their lives went from fairy tale couple with 2 children living in a charming home to a destitute family living off the charity of family members. Chris had the stamina and strength of a soldier, the archetype in the 12th house. She had chosen the soldier not just because it helped her cope with her problems, but also because she had always been the one to fight the battles for the family's emotional survival. Her father was a military officer who condemned any form of emotional openness, and her brothers were alcoholics. Because her mother was not capable of coping with so much dysfunction, Chris had become a lightning rod from the earliest days for all the tension in the house. On a more mundane level, Chris chose the soldier because it represented strength, dedication, loyalty, and honor, qualities she felt were among the highest that one could aspire to. At the time I met Chris, she was in crisis. Without self-pity, she nonetheless had reached the point at which she was questioning why she had to endure so much, while those around her could live in abusive ways. I was on the brink of a nervous breakdown, she told me. I had no one I could talk to and no idea where to go or what to do next. My entire life had changed in one afternoon, the afternoon of her husband's arrest. To gather symbolic information that could help Chris decide how to proceed, I directed her to think in language of the soldier. I always did think of my childhood as boot camp, she joked. Then I asked her to describe everything in her life that was involved with her present crisis, as if she were a soldier. To begin with, she responded, I was always taking orders for my dad. When I wanted to do something for myself, I had to sneak past enemy lines to get out on my own. This pattern did not change after I got married. Obviously, I married in the patterns of my family, except that my father is an honest man. All the while my husband was breaking the law, I knew something was wrong. His moods were changing, and he was becoming more and more withdrawn and secretive, but he kept insisting that he was just tired from the stress at work. I didn't listen to my gut instinct, which is a soldier's best weapon. While he was living in this secret world, I could feel myself bracing for war, an invisible emotional battle that would tear our marriage apart. I just couldn't find the enemy. I knew he wasn't cheating on me with another woman, but I never dreamed he was stealing. Chris's husband was eventually caught because he left a paper trail at his office, and his superiors followed it. I asked Chris to separate from this trauma and think like a soldier who had just been asked the question, "What are your worst fears?" She said the strongest fear was having her life spin out of control. That is precisely why I married someone who I thought had what it took to keep order in our lives. At the same time, I resented the fact that I was surrounded by so much male authority. I also resented that I was allowing myself to be ordered around. I wasn't blind to the fact. I simply liked the feeling that I was being looked after, as I was when my family was living on an army base. But now that's changed, and my life has been shattered as if a bomb hit it. I have to care for myself because I feel that I need to leave my marriage and get on with my own life. Breaking point experiences are classic to the 12th house, and Chris's marriage reflected that kind of drama. Obviously, her contract with her husband did not include that he became a thief. That was a choice he had made, but he also had an option to make positive choices. If a soldier were to ask you for advice, I said to Chris, what would you say in this situation? Chris said that she would order the soldier to draw a map that led to a destination, even though she knew nothing about the destination. She had to prepare her equipment and brace herself for a rough journey, though sometimes these treks turn out to be much easier than expected. The nights are long, she said, because that's when she feels most vulnerable. But I hold on to the thought that I am under contracts instead of orders these days, and the military is responsible to protect and provide for its soldiers. I know that's true because I grew up in that world and never saw it fail one soldier. I'll be fine. Chris felt a growing sense of self-reliance as she released her need to be under someone else's command. She got on with her life. And every time she felt lost in the jungle, as she put it, she referred to her soldier archetype and all the symbolic force that it held for her. By substituting the word contracts for orders, she signified that her commanding officer was divine. The shadow side of the 12th house can feel very much like a Gothic chamber of horrors, precisely because it is so closely linked to the numerous fragments of our psyche. Many of our addictions and compulsions are rooted in our deepest fears of being abandoned, which thrive in the shadow of this house. Now that you have familiarized yourself with the nature and role of each of the 12 houses that make up the archetypal wheel, it's time to create your own personal wheel by following the intuitive process outlined in the next chapter. You will place each of your 12 archetypes into a different house of the wheel. This, your personal archetypical wheel, will become the single most important roadmap to working with your archetypes and understanding your sacred contract. Exciting! All right, let's see what archetype we left off at. And I ordered a book just the other day by this author, Carolyn Miss, that breaks down all the archetypes even further, which I'm doing my own archetypal wheel, and I'm excited to try to figure out which archetype goes into which house. Okay, so the archetype we left off with was King, Emperor, ruler, leader, chief. The king is an archetype of major proportions, representing the highest of temporal male power and authority. Both benevolence and cruelty in their extreme expressions are associated with this archetype. Classic to cruel king is the collective hope of his kingdom and that he should fall from his throne. The king is associated more with royal blood and inheritance, whereas an emperor can arise from common society, as did Napoleon. The bloodline connects the king to the prince archetype and to the attitudes of entitlement. One of the shadow characteristics of this archetype of the archetypes associated with rulership. A resistance to criticism, questioning, and challenges in decisions about controlling his kingdom is also part of the king's shadow. Throughout history, the pendulum has swung from good kings to evil, from benevolent, even saintly rulers to greedy, gluttonous criminals. King Louis, now I wrote down the Roman numerals, and I think I've read this before because I remember getting stuck on this, but that's okay. We'll read it again. King Louis the 11th of France, I think I got that right. Saint Louis combined with the qualities of a just ruler, fearless warrior, and holy man. The 13th century sovereign lived for the welfare of his subjects and the glory of God. Charlemagne, King David, and Akhenaton of Egypt were among Earth's most enlightened, if occasionally all too human rulers. And then there was mad King George III of England, who led the colonies to rebel. King Louis the XVI of France, who was synonymous with decadence and excess. And Emperor Hirohito of Japan, who led his country into devastating war. This archetype maintains the same characteristics on an individual level, whether one's kingdom is a corporation, a community, or a family. The need to rule and extort control over a kingdom is a key to this archetype. Films: Charles Lofton in The Private Life of King Henry VIII, Yul Brennan in The King and I, Richard Gere in King David, Paul Scofield in King Lear, Christopher Walken in The King of New York, Shadow Extraordinaire. Drama: Richard III, Henry the Sixth, Henry V, Hamlet, Macbeth by Shakespeare. Fiction: King of the Gypsies by Peter Maas, The Godfather by Mario Puzo, Shadow, The One and Future King by T.H. White. Religion and Myth: Priam, King of Troy. Dabutsu Diabusatu, Japan, Religion and Myth. No, Japan, Meditating Buddha as World Ruler. Sila or Silap Inu, divine ruler of the Eskimos, seen as the air you breathe and the energy that moves the entire... Yeah, I have read this before because I remember I wanted to look this person up. Sila or Silap Inu, divine ruler of Eskimos, seen as the air you breathe or the energy that moves both the entire universe and each of us individually. Amun, supreme Egyptian creator god, originally ruler of the air and force behind wind and breezes. Chief Seattle Native American leader. Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, later identified by the Rastafarian religion. All right, that's it. And I wanted to say the other day when I was reading about Cancer, I woke up thinking about this, so I'm just going to bring it up. I noted that my dad is a Cancer, my son is a Cancer, and I forgot to mention that my daughter's father is also a Cancer. All three of those individuals are deceased. But yeah, my daughter's father was also a Cancer, July 20th, which is crazy. My son was July 19th, the father of my daughter's July 20th, and my father is July 22nd. All Cancers, all dead. All right, everyone have a great week. See you tomorrow.